Food security. You hear that term all the time, right? But what does it really mean? Turns out it's not just about having enough food piled up in a warehouse. It's a much bigger, more complex, and deeply human story. And to really get our heads around it, we're going to look at the journey of one nation, India, and see what its story tells us about this huge global challenge. Okay, let's get into it.
Just let that sink in for a moment. That's a real quote from a survivor of the 1943 Bengal famine, an absolute catastrophe that took as many as 5 million lives. Now, this wasn't just some historical tragedy. It was a moment that literally forged a nation's entire approach to food, all driven by one single desperate goal: to make sure this never, ever happened again. So you can imagine, coming out of something that horrific, the soon-to-be independent India was facing a massive question. How in the world do we build a system to prevent this from ever repeating? And the answer they came up with would become one of the most ambitious and, as we'll see, complicated food security systems on the planet.
To really understand this whole system, and food security in general, you have to think of it in three parts, three main pillars. First up is availability. Basically, is there enough food in the country to begin with? Second, there's access. Okay, the food exists, but can people actually get their hands on it? And third, and this one's crucial, is nutrition. Is the food people are actually eating giving them what their bodies need? We're going to walk through each one of these.
And it's so important to remember this one thing about the Bengal famine. It wasn't caused by a lack of food in India. There was food. The problem was the British administration's policies that stopped that food from getting to the people who were starving. It was a man-made disaster of access, and that painful lesson shaped everything that was to come.
So if you're a country haunted by that memory of famine, what's your first move? It's pretty logical, right? You focus on sheer volume. The goal becomes self-sufficiency. Just make more food. A lot more. Fill up those national granaries, no matter what it takes.
And wow, on that front, the success was absolutely staggering. I mean, just look at these numbers. Between 1971 and 2011, paddy production, that's rice, more than doubled. And wheat, it went completely off the charts, growing by over 250%. So mission accomplished, right? Plenty of food for everyone.
Well, not so fast. See, this intense focus on high-yield wheat and rice came with a hidden cost. The production of what we now call nutri-cereals, traditional super nutritious grains like millets, it just flatlined. It didn't grow at all. So the country was making more calories, sure, but the national diet was actually becoming less diverse. It's a classic case of solving one problem only to accidentally create a new one down the road.
And this leads us to the central paradox of this whole story. India did it. It achieved self-sufficiency. Its warehouses were literally overflowing with grain. And yet, millions of its people were still hungry. How is that possible? Well, it's because producing the food is only step one. Which brings us to our second pillar, access. Look, having mountains of grains sitting in a government warehouse is one thing. But getting that food onto a family's dinner plate, that's a completely different challenge. And here's the crucial point. At the end of the day, the biggest barrier between a full warehouse and an empty stomach is often just plain old poverty. It's what economists call purchasing power. If you don't have the money to buy food, it doesn't really matter how much is sitting on the store shelf. Hunger, fundamentally, is an economic problem. This chart just makes that brutally clear. Have a look. In rural India, the richest quarter of the population, they're doing fine, easily getting the recommended 2,400 daily calories. But now look at the poorest quarter. They're trying to get by on just over 1,600 calories a day. That's a massive chronic energy gap, especially for people doing hard physical labor every single day. The food is there, but they just can't afford to buy enough of it. So India's answer to this access problem was monumental. It was called the Public Distribution System, or PDS. Think of it like a massive nationwide network of ration shops.
Basically, government-run stores designed to sell essential grains to the poor at super low, subsidized prices. I mean, on paper, it sounds like the perfect solution.
But in the real world, things got a lot more complicated. This data from back in 2011-12 shows that nationwide, a majority of households, over 55%, were not getting their staple foods from the PDS. So even with this enormous government system in place, it just wasn't reaching huge chunks of the population it was designed to help.
And this brings us to our final and maybe the most important pillar. Because even for the people who do get food from the PDS, what are they getting? Mostly rice and wheat. So this system, which was built to solve the access problem, accidentally created another crisis, the crisis of nutrition. It's what many people call hidden hunger.
And the statistics that reveal this crisis are just mind-boggling. Let's start with this one. A major survey found that 45% of all Indian children between 1 and 5 are underweight. 45%. That's nearly half. That's not just a number on a chart. It's a quiet catastrophe happening to an entire generation.
But it gets even more serious. 41% of those children are what's known as stunted. Now, stunting isn't just about being short for your age. It's a sign of chronic undernutrition so severe that it can cause irreversible damage to a child's physical growth and even their brain development for the rest of their life.
And this isn't just a childhood problem that goes away. Nope. The crisis carries right on into adulthood. About 35% of all adults in India suffer from chronic energy deficiency. This affects their health, their ability to work, their ability to raise healthy kids of their own. It's just this awful, vicious cycle. So let's pull all three of these pillars together for a second. We have availability. Check. Lots of food. We have a massive system for access, even if it has some serious holes in it. And yet, we see this population suffering from widespread, debilitating malnutrition. What does that actually look like for a real person day to day? Well, here's where the policy hits the pavement. A study in one state, Chhattisgarh, found that for a typical poor family of 5, the 35 kilograms of grain they got from the ration shop, it lasted them just 11 days. For the other 19 or 20 days of the month, they were completely on their own.
And this brings us to this incredibly powerful statement from a doctor who was working right there on the front lines. He said, we use these clinical, almost sterile words like malnourished or underweight. But he suggests that what those terms are actually measuring, what those people are feeling every single day, is just hunger.
And so we end up right back where we started, but now we can see things a bit more clearly. Food security isn't some simple math problem about how much grain you've produced. It's this delicate balance between availability, access, and nutrition. And walking through this journey forces us all to ask a much bigger question. What does security really mean if a nation's granaries are full, but its people are still hungry?
All right, let's get started. First question. When did the Great Bengal Famine, which caused 3 to 5 million deaths, take place? The correct answer is C, 1943-1945. This was a truly devastating time, happening right in the middle of World War II. It was a terrible combination of natural disasters and wartime policies that led to the tragedy, and it really shaped India's focus on food security for decades to come. So, thinking about that, here's the next question. Which of the following is a way the Indian government ensures food security for its people today? And the answer here is C, midday meal schemes. You've probably heard of this one, right? It's a massive government program that provides free cooked lunches to children in school. It's a fantastic way to tackle both hunger and education at the same time. Okay, looking at this graph on food grain production, which food crop saw a rapid increase in production similar to paddy between 1970 and 2011? The correct option is C, wheat. Yep, Along with paddy, which is rice, wheat was one of the superstars of India's Green Revolution. The production of both just skyrocketed, which was a huge deal for the country's food supply. Now, looking at that same graph again, the production of which crop group did not increase much between 1970 and 2011, especially when you compare it to paddy and wheat? The answer is B, nutri-cereals. You know, these are the so-called coarse grains like jowar and bajra. While wheat and rice got a lot of attention, these traditional crops were kind of left behind, and their production didn't really grow much for a long time. All right, let's talk numbers. How is the availability of food grains for the year calculated? Okay, the correct answer is B. You take the total amount produced, add any food grains that were imported, and then subtract any change in the amount the government has in its reserves. That gives you the complete picture of what's available. We just mentioned them, so here's a question about it. Which of the following is an example of a coarse cereal, which is now also called a nutri-cereal? The right answer is C, jowar. Jowar, which is also known as sorghum, is a perfect example. These nutritious cereals are getting popular again because they're super healthy and can grow in tough, dry conditions. Moving on to nutrition, according to nutritionists, what is the suggested daily intake of vegetables for every person in India? The correct answer is C, 300 grams. Yep, 300 grams. To give you an idea, that's about the weight of a large capsicum or a couple of medium-sized tomatoes. It's a good number to aim for. Now, let's talk about energy. What is the recommended daily food intake in kilocalories for a person living in rural areas? And the answer is C, 2,400 kilocalories. This is a little bit higher than the recommendation for people in urban areas, and that's mainly because life in rural areas often involves more physical labor. Here's one about a major law. The National Food Security Act of 2013 was made to apply to approximately how much of India's total population? The correct answer is C, 2/3. Just think about that for a second. 2/3 of the entire population. This makes it one of the largest food safety net programs anywhere in the world. It's massive. Okay, next one. What is the stock of food grains, mainly wheat and rice, that's procured by the government through the Food Corporation of India, or FCI, called? The correct answer is C, buffer stock. This stock is super important. The government uses it for the public distribution system and also to release grains into the market to help keep food prices stable for everyone. And how does the government get those grains? Well, what is the pre-announced price that the government pays to farmers for their crops called? And the answer is B, minimum support price. You've probably heard this called MSP. It's a really critical policy that acts as a safety net for farmers, guaranteeing them a certain price for their hard work. Switching back to health, when a child has a short height for their age due to long-term undernourishment, what is this condition called? The correct term here is C, stunting. This is a very serious issue because it's a sign of chronic or long-term malnutrition, and it can affect a child's growth and brain development for their entire life. Let's look at some data on this. According to a survey by the National Institute of Nutrition, what percentage of children in the 1 to 5 year age group are underweight? The answer is a staggering C, 45%. It's a shocking number, isn't it? Almost half. This really just shows how important and urgent the work on child nutrition is. It's not just about kids, though. For adults, what condition does a body mass index, or BMI, of less than 18.5 indicate? The correct answer is C, chronic energy deficiency. Basically, it's a scientific way of saying that a person isn't getting enough calories to maintain a healthy body weight, which can lead to a whole range of health problems. All right, last question. In the public distribution system, how many kilograms of food grains are Antyodaya cardholders entitled to get per month, per family? The correct answer is D, 35 kgs. So, these families, who are identified as the poorest of the poor, get a guaranteed 35 kilos of food grains every single month at a very low price. For millions, this is an absolute lifeline. For more videos and practice bits, please subscribe our channel.